Hello, and welcome to Math Matters. I'm Miss Matthews, and today we are going to explore problem solving with fractions. Today we will be looking at a few different tools to help us understand and solve problems with subtraction of fractions. Today during our lesson, you'll also practice your Portrait of a Graduate skills for being a communicator by communicating your thinking on paper. Mathematicians are always thinking about how they can communicate their thinking verbally and in writing so that others can understand how they solved a problem. One way they do that is to figure out how to represent their thinking. Two possible tools you might consider using today are an area model or a number line. Here are the materials you'll want to have for today's lesson: a pencil or something to write with, and a piece of paper. I'll give you a moment to go gather them now. Let's read the following story problem together. Follow along as I read it aloud, and visualize what is happening in the story. Jaya bought 5 pizzas for his birthday party. The guests ate 3 1/4 pizzas. How much pizza does Jaya have left? What do we know about this story? Let's start with how many pizzas were there? Yes, we know there were 5 pizzas at the party. As problem solvers, we need to think about how to keep track of important information in a story. I put a box around 5 pizzas because I know that is going to be important for me to know to solve the problem. You might also consider highlighting or circling important information. You can decide what works best for you. Next, how many pizzas were eaten? That's right, 3 1/4 pizzas were eaten. So what do we need to figure out? Yes, we need to figure out how much pizza is left over that did not get eaten. Now let's estimate. Is Jaya going to have more or less than 5 pizzas left? How do you know? You've got it. Jaya will have less than 5 pizzas after the guests have eaten some of the pizza. Now take a moment to work this problem out and think about which representation might help you solve the problem and explain your thinking. Also, write down the equation that goes with this problem. Remember these models that we shared earlier. Which of these models might help you solve our pizza problem? Now that you've decided on which model to use, I'll give you 1 minute to solve this problem using the model that you picked. Remember, write down the equation that goes with the problem. The equation that matches our story problem and that we need to solve for is 5 minus 3 1/4. Because Jaya bought 5 pizzas for the party, and we know that 3 1/4 were eaten, so we're going to subtract 3 1/4 from the amount of pizza that we started with, which was 5. So let's go ahead and draw those 5 pizzas. I chose to draw circles because they kind of remind me of pizzas. So now let's take away the 3 whole pizzas. To demonstrate what was eaten, I cross out the 3 pizzas. Now let's take away the 1/4 of the pizza that was eaten. In order to do this, we need to break one of the pizzas into fourths. Now we can take away 1/4 of that pizza. Now we can see what we have left. How much pizza does Jaya have left? We can see that we have 1 whole pizza here and 3 1/4 pieces of pizza here. So how much pizza is 3 1/4? 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 equals 3/4. So if we combine that 1 whole pizza with the 3/4, that gives us 1 3/4. So we have 1 3/4 pizzas left. To solve the pizza problem, we used a model to represent our thinking. Let's recap the steps that we took to solve this problem and put some equations with it to record them. What did we do first? Right. First, we subtracted 3 whole pizzas from the 5 pizzas. So 5 minus 3 equals 2. We had 2 whole pizzas left, and we subtracted the 1/4. So 2 minus 1/4 equals 1 3/4. Now we know that the whole equation, 5 minus 3 1/4, equals 1 3/4. Let's read the following story problem together. Follow along as I read it aloud and visualize what is happening in the story. Ernesto walks 2 1/2 miles each day. He has already walked 3/4 of a mile. How much further does Ernesto have to walk today? What do we know about Ernesto in this story? How much does he walk each day? Yes, we know that he walks 2 1/2 miles every day. How far has he walked already today? That's right. He's already walked 3/4 of a mile today. So what do we need to figure out? Yes, we need to figure out how much further he still needs to walk today. That means we have to figure out how much more he needs to walk to get to his 2 1/2 miles. Now let's estimate. Does Ernesto still need to walk more or less than 2 1/2 miles? How do you know? Yes, 2 1/2 miles is going to be the total amount that he needs to walk. So our answer is going to be less than 2 1/2 miles because he's already done some of his walking for today. Now take a moment to think about which representation might help you solve the problem and explain your thinking. Remember, these are a few of the models that we shared earlier. Which of these models might help you solve our walking problem? I will give you 1 minute to solve this problem using the model of your choice. Remember, write down the equation that goes with the problem. In our last problem, I used the area model to help me solve and represent my thinking. For this problem, I think that the number line makes sense to me, since this story is about distance and how far Ernesto is walking. Either model can work though, so if you didn't use the number line, that's just fine. Think about how it compares to what you did. What do you notice about this number line? We can see that this number line goes from 0 to 3. Why do you think I chose a range of 0 to 3? Yes, I know that Ernesto walked more than 2 miles, but less than 3. We can also see that the number line is counting by fourths. Now let's think about what we know about Ernesto's walk. We know that he's already walked 3/4 of a mile. So I'm going to show that like this. We also know that Ernesto is going to walk 2.5 miles today. So we can mark that like this. We know that 2.5 is equivalent to 2 2/4 because they both lie halfway between 2 and 3. So now we just need to figure out how far it is from 3/4 to 2.5. How did you, or how might you, hop on the number line to show that? One way we could figure this out is we could start at the 3/4 and count up to 2.5, like this. The equation that matches that is 3/4 plus blank equals 2 1/2. One way we can do this is to take a hop of 1/4 to get to 1, since 1 is a friendly number. Now we can jump 1 whole, from 1 to 2, like this. And then we have 2 little hops of 1/4 to get to 2 1/2. So where is our answer to the problem in this representation? That's right, our answer is in the hops. We need to combine these hops to get our answer. 3 1/4 gives us 3/4. Then we combine the 1 with the 3/4 and we get 1 3/4. Now we know that Ernesto has 1 3/4 miles left to walk today. So go back to our original equation. 3/4 plus 1 3/4 equals 2 1/2. This is an example of how we can use addition or counting up to solve this problem. Another way we could figure this out using the number line is to count back from 2 1/2 to 3/4, like this. And the equation that matches that is 2 1/2 minus what equals 3/4. What would you do to figure this out? How would you figure it out in the fewest amount of hops? One way you might think about doing this is to hop back to a friendly number like 2. When I hop back from 2 1/2 to 2, that is a hop of 2/4, or 1/2. Next, I know that I can hop back 1 whole from 2 to 1, like this. Then we can see that we have just 1 hop left, 1/4, to get back to 3/4, like this. So where do we find our answer here? Again, we can see our answer in our hops. We can combine our 1/4 and our 2/4, or 1/2, to get 3/4. And then we can combine the 3/4 and the 1/2 to get 1 3/4. 1 3/4 gives us our answer. So now let's put that back into our equation. 2½ minus 1 3/4 equals 3/4. So Ernesto needs to walk 1 3/4 more miles. This is an example of how we can use subtraction or counting backwards to solve this problem. Take a moment to think about what is similar and different about these two strategies. Using the number line, we can see how we can use addition or subtraction to find the distance between our two numbers from the problem. Another thing that is different is that the strategies used the number line to hop in different ways. The first one hops up the number line and hops by 1/4 and 1/2. The second one hops back down the number line and hops by 1/4, 1/2, and 2/4. How does this compare to what you did? If you used another model, can you see how your model is similar and different compared to the number line? Today you solved two problems with different contexts, and you considered which tool best helped you to solve that problem, and you communicated your thinking when adding and subtracting fractions. As you think about the learning goals for today, maybe there's something new you learned that you don't want to forget. Or maybe there's something we talked about today that you still have questions about. Take a minute to record your reflection on today's lesson. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Math Matters for 3rd grade. My name is Miss Matthews. I hope you have a fun-filled mathematical day and keep on counting.